Welcome, dear listener, to a journey through a world of stone and fire, faith and betrayal, ambition and endurance. Tonight we step back into the 12th century, into a land torn between hunger and hope, where the dream of a great cathedral will change the fate of kings and commoners alike. This is The Pillars of the Earth, Ken Follett. If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Novel Whisper Official, and comment below the title of the novel you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. The wind moans across the English countryside, carrying the metallic tang of blood. A crowd gathers in the cold air, eyes fixed on the gallows at the center of the market square. Merchants, peasants, even children press forward, eager for the grim spectacle. At the heart of it, a man stands trembling, a coarse rope looped around his neck. He has been branded a thief, though many whisper that his guilt is less certain than the law would admit. Justice here in the year 1123 is not always a matter of truth. It is often a matter of power. As the trapdoor falls and the man jerks, you hear the crack of bone, see the life slip from his face, and feel the shudder pass through the people. Yet in the shadows stands someone else. Tom Builder, a mason with dust ground into his skin. A man whose hands are rough from chiseling stone. He watches the execution not with glee nor even with horror, but with a craftsman's weary eyes. For Tom has his own burdens, an unfinished job, an unpaid wage, a wife who grows thin with hunger, and children whose stomachs grumble with every step they take. Tom carries within him a vision he cannot shake. It comes to him in dreams and in waking reveries. A vast cathedral of light, arches that soar toward heaven, towers that scrape the clouds, stone columns like trees turned to marble. It is not just a building but a prayer in stone, a promise of eternity carved into the earth. Yet dreams do not feed children, and Tom feels the bite of despair. The execution he witnessed is only another reminder of how fragile life is, how quickly all can be lost. Winter bears down harshly. Tom, his pregnant wife Agnes, their little daughter Martha, and young Alfred, Tom's son from his first marriage, wander from town to town in search of work. The roads are crowded with beggars and soldiers, war drums rumbling in the distance. England is a land in chaos, ruled by King Henry, whose grasp on power is fragile and threatened by rival claims. For commoners like Tom, noble struggles mean little, except that armies trample their fields and raiders strip their homes. Hunger gnaws at them. In one of the coldest nights, as snow drifts down, Agnes goes into labor. She is weak and her body has been worn thin by years of hardship. Tom kneels beside her, helpless, his rough hands trembling as he delivers the baby. The child's first cries cut through the icy silence. A boy, a new life. But joy is crushed beneath grief. Agnes has bled too much. She fades quickly, her voice barely a whisper as she names the boy Jonathan before death takes her away. Tom is left stunned, holding his newborn son with two other hungry mouths by his side. He does what he thinks is merciful. In the forest, in the shadow of the towering trees, he digs a shallow grave for Agnes, his tears soaking into the frozen earth. And then, with a heart that feels as though it is splitting in two, he leaves the baby on the cold ground, believing he has no strength to keep him alive. He walks away, dragging his children through the snow, the cries of the abandoned infant echoing in his ears like the tolling of a funeral bell. But fate is not done with Tom. From the edge of the forest comes a figure cloaked in rags, wild-haired, eyes fierce as a hawk's. Ellen. She is unlike any woman Tom has ever known, untamed, fearless, with a strange beauty that unsettles him. Beside her is a boy with red hair and a quiet, piercing gaze. Jack. Ellen picks up the crying infant, pressing him against her chest, and with that gesture, Tom's path veers into a new life. The unlikely band travels together, bound by hunger and loss. Tom finds in Ellen a companion who is both mysterious and grounding, though whispers follow her. Some say she is a witch, cursed for speaking against a corrupt priest. Others claim she consorts with the devil. Tom, who has seen his wife die in childbirth and nearly abandoned his son to die in the snow, sees only a fierce spirit who speaks truth without fear. As they move through the frost-bitten forests and ruined villages of England, Tom carries his vision of the cathedral like a secret flame. Even as his children shiver with cold, even as he wonders how they will survive another day, he sketches in the dirt with a stick the arches, the vaults, the spire that will pierce the sky. To him, building is not just work. It is meaning. It is salvation. But dreams must wait for bread, and Tom knows that hunger can crush even faith. He wonders if he will ever find the chance to lift his vision from earth to heaven, or if, like the man on the gallows, his hopes are doomed to dangle lifeless, abandoned in the cold. The bitter winter refuses to loosen its grip. You trudge with Tom and his children along a frozen road, snow stinging your cheeks, your stomach hollow with hunger. Agnes is gone, her absence a wound that nothing can close, and the baby Jonathan, left on the forest floor, haunts Tom with every step. He hears the echo of that infant cry in his dreams, feels the weight of his wife's dying plea pressing on his chest. Each footfall is guilt and grief made flesh, yet life has no pause for mourning. Work is scarce, and Tom's trade is one of stone, mortar, and timber, materials that require money he does not have. Villages whisper about famine, about the king's death, and the shadow of civil war looming over England. Some people curse God for their hunger, some turn to theft, others to violence. Tom clings to his children, to Ellen, and to the half-formed cathedral that towers in his imagination. If only a nobleman or a bishop would give him a commission, he might exchange his vision for bread. One bleak day, Tom and his ragged family stumble into a clearing where Ellen has made her home. She is a woman apart, living with her strange son Jack, in the ruins of an old forest chapel. Her manner is sharp and wild, but her hands are gentle as she nurses Jonathan, the infant Tom had abandoned. Shame and gratitude wash over Tom at once. He realizes he has been spared an unendurable guilt, and that this woman and her son are now entwined with his destiny. For a brief time, the makeshift family survives together. Tom finds in Ellen a partner who understands his obsession with stone and beauty, who shares his hunger for something larger than the dirt and misery of their lives. Jack, pale and intense, listens with rapt attention to Tom's dreams of building a cathedral, asking endless questions, memorizing every detail. He is a child apart from others, with a mind like a flame that will not dim. But hope is fragile. Hunger presses harder, supplies dwindle. When a group of outlaws threatens them in the woods, the family flees. In their desperate wandering, they arrive at a monastery, Kingsbridge Priory. Its monks, led by Prior Philip, provide food and shelter. For Tom, this place seems touched by fate. The priory's church is crumbling, its stones cracked, its roof sagging. Yet even in its decay, Tom sees possibility. If the monks would let him build anew, he could turn despair into creation. He could raise his cathedral here at the heart of England. At the same time, in the halls of nobility, another story unfolds. The mighty Earl of Shiring, William Hamleigh's father, schemes to marry his brutish son into power. William is strong, broad-shouldered, and ruthless, but he lacks grace, wit, or charm. He lusts for status as much as he lusts for flesh, and he sets his eyes on Lady Aliena, the beautiful daughter of the Earl of Shiring's rival, Bartholomew. For Aliena, proud and intelligent, marriage to William is a nightmare she refuses. Her heart burns with loyalty to her father and her brother Richard, who is destined to inherit the earldom. But destiny is not kind. When King Henry dies, England fractures into civil war. His only legitimate son has drowned years before, and now two rivals claim the crown: his daughter, the Empress Maud, and his nephew Stephen. The land is torn apart by shifting loyalties. Bartholomew, Aliena's father, supports Maud. William Hamleigh's family backs Stephen. Treachery follows swiftly. Bartholomew is seized, his land stolen, and Aliena is cast into a brutal world she has never known. Forced to fight for survival with her brother at her side. Back in Kingsbridge, Prior Philip dreams of raising a great cathedral to restore the priory's prestige and serve God's glory. Unlike many of his fellow clergy, Philip is not driven by greed but by faith and an unbending sense of order. He sees in Tom Builder a man capable of bringing this vision to life. Their meeting feels preordained. For Tom, the commission to rebuild Kingsbridge Cathedral is salvation itself, the fulfillment of the dream that carried him through hunger and loss. For Philip, Tom is the hand by which God's will shall be carved into stone. Yet shadows gather around them. The Hamleigh family, humiliated by Aliena's rejection, seeks vengeance by crushing Kingsbridge's rise. William, consumed by a rage that never cools, begins a campaign of terror, pillaging villages, spreading fire, and sowing fear. He is a man of power without mercy, a living storm that smashes whatever lies in his path. For Tom, the cathedral becomes more than a building. It is a way to defy the chaos of the age, to prove that beauty can be born in a world of ruin. Every stone laid is a promise that life can outlast destruction, that order can rise above violence. As you watch the first foundations dug into the earth, you feel the echo of Tom's vision. Soaring arches, light streaming through colored glass, a heaven built on human will. But even as hope flickers, danger stalks closer. War between Stephen and Maud darkens the land. Nobles clash, peasants starve, and William Hamleigh sharpens his sword. And in the shadows, Ellen's son Jack, strange, brilliant, and restless, watches the rising stones of Kingsbridge and feels the stirrings of a destiny neither he nor Tom can yet name. The great cathedral has been born in dreams and drawn into the dirt. Now, brick by brick, it begins to rise into the English sky, its foundations deep as grief, its spire aimed toward eternity. But every stone invites both wonder and envy, and the enemies of Kingsbridge are gathering like wolves at the forest's edge. At the edge of the forest, you enter a world of hush and green. A ruined chapel crouches under ivy, its broken arch a frame for the pale sky. Smoke curls from a small hearth. Ellen moves through the dim light like someone who belongs to wind and water more than walls. Jack follows her in quiet steps, a bundle of red hair and bright, watchful eyes that take in everything and give away almost nothing. He is a boy who listens first, who touches stone as if it could speak back. Here, time softens. Ellen teaches letters with a stick in the dirt and charcoal on the chapel's fallen stones. She presses Jack's hand to the shapes. ABC Latin words and scraps of French drift from her tongue. She is not like other villagers. She reads, she argues, and she shows Jack that words are tools sharper than knives. She tells him stories that don't sound like sermons. A ship in a storm. A young man who sailed farther than fear. A love cut short by the noose and a lie told by a priest with cold eyes. Jack asks about his father and the air tightens. A good man, Ellen says, and one day you'll know more. She does not add a prayer. When Tom arrives with Alfred and Martha, hunger loosens its grip for a while. Ellen gives up a corner of the chapel and something like a family forms in the ash glow of the hearth. Tom sketches lines in the dust at night, walls thick as oak trunks, ribs that cross like branches, a tower that points at God. He speaks softly, but the shapes he draws are larger than any voice. Jack crouches beside him, memorizing every curve, every mark. Tom notices the boy's attention, and in the blank afternoon hours he shows him how to set a plumb line, how to read a stone's grain, how to feel weight with his palm instead of his eyes. Alfred watches and scowls. He wants his father's gaze, his father's praise, and he sees it land too often on this silent, strange boy. Alfred's hands are strong. His back is broad. He lifts timbers no one else can lift. He frames a beam quickly and true. But Jack's touch is different. He begins to carve little things when no one looks. A leaf that curls at the tip. A fox's muzzle tucked into its paws. A tiny face frowning like an old monk. One evening, Tom finds the carvings and weighs them in his rough fingers. He does not smile often, but he does now. A short, private curve of the mouth. "Good work," he says. Alfred hears it from across the chapel and turns away. Kingsbridge Priory gives them bread, salt, and a dry corner when storms crush the forest path. Prior Philip's eyes are clear and steady. He moves with the same careful economy he uses to count coins and measure grain. He speaks to Tom about the failing church and listens in that patient way that makes people want to be honest. Tom shows him sketches. Philip asks questions that go straight to the joint. Where will the thrust fall? How will the light enter? Who will quarry the stone? He is no mason, yet he thinks like one. He tells Tom the priory has little money but a greater purpose, and that purpose is a house worthy of God, a cathedral if Providence opens the way. The baby Jonathan, warm in Ellen's arms and named by a dying mother, becomes the hinge between two lives. In the priory yard, bells swing and braids of onions dry in the wind. Philip looks at the child and sees a soul in need of shelter. Tom looks and sees the son he left on the cold earth and can barely stand under the weight of it. Ellen looks and sees a life that must continue no matter what men decide about God. After a long evening in which no one says much, Tom places Jonathan into Philip's keeping. The monk accepts him and promises food, warmth, and a future within the priory walls. Tom's fingers hold on for a breath longer than they should, then let go. Martha cries in quiet, wet hiccups. Alfred stares at the ground. Jack watches the monk lift the baby and wonders why a heart can feel both torn and eased at once. Rumor crawls along the roads. A king is dead. Two claimants pull the rope of England from opposite ends. Stephen, Maud, fields burn, oaths break. On market days, people lean over sacks of barley and whisper the new name everyone is learning to fear. William Hamleigh, a lord's son with a taste for power and a hunger that looks like hatred. Villages close their gates earlier. Men sharpen tools at night not for harvest but for defense. Philip notes each change the way he notes the weight of a loaf. He prays, he counts grain. He holds to order like a mast in heavy water. Under that growing storm, something steady begins. Tom secures small work around Kingsbridge while Philip pursues the money, the timber rights, and the stone. Tom supervises repairs, takes measures, tests the soil, and dreams forward the lines of a building no one has yet agreed to fund. He walks the footprint of the old church and stands at the east end where light will one day pour like a river. Jack walks with him, steps careful, attention fierce. "Look," Tom says, and with a string and a stick he draws a curve on the ground. Then another that meets it in a point that seems to lean toward heaven without strain. He cannot build what the century has not yet fully imagined, but he can feel the logic inside shape. "Wait wants a path," he says. "Give it a clean one." Jack nods, filing the idea somewhere behind his eyes. Ellen prowls the edges of town like a wary fox. Some women turn their backs when she passes. Some men cross themselves. She does not care. She brings mushrooms, snared rabbits, herbs for fevers. At night she speaks low by the hearth. She tells Jack to trust what he can prove with his hands and his mind. She warns him about men who love power more than truth. When the bells toll late one evening, she stands up too fast, as if a memory has jabbed her. "A monk with winter eyes," she mutters, more to the fire than to anyone. "Remember the way liars look when they try to pass as saints." Jack stores that too. The thin cloth over this piece tears in small places first. Alfred shoves Jack near the ash heap and calls him a bastard, a wolf's whelp, a witch's brat. Jack does not fight. He watches, weighing the cost. Alfred wants the fight because it would be simple. Jack wants the work because it is not. But even patient boys have limits. When Alfred knocks a small carving from Jack's hand and grinds it under his heel, something cold snaps. Jack lunges. They go down in a flurry of fists and grit. Tom breaks them apart with one pull, breath hard, face grim. He puts a hand on each shoulder. "We build here," he says. "We do not break." Alfred turns his head away, jaw tight. Jack nods once and wipes blood from his lip, eyes bright and far away. The priory scriptorium smells of ink and vellum. Jack slips in when he can, drawn by the quiet. A friendly lay brother shows him how letters marry on a page. The boy copies a line in a neat, careful hand and feels a doorway open. He begins to see how math hides in arches, how stories hide in stone, how the world can be read if you know its alphabet. He watches the monk's order and wonders how much of it is faith and how much is habit. He does not say this aloud. News rides hard from the west. A hamlet near Shiring was disciplined by William Hamleigh's men. The word means torches. It means fear shot through with smoke. Travelers arrive at the priory gate with ash in their hair. Philip feeds them and prays over them and writes a name in a ledger. Tom listens and feels his jaw set. A cathedral is not a shield against such men, yet he believes that to raise it is still a defiance. To shape stone into grace is to say the world is not only the property of the brutal. One gray morning, Jack carries a basket of offcuts to the waste heap. He pauses and turns back to the footprint of the future nave, to the corner where Tom made the string draw the clean curve. Frost clings to the grass and breath hangs in the air. He kneels and presses his palm to the ground where a pier will one day stand. The earth is cold and solid. He closes his eyes and sees light travel through colored glass. Sees ribs climb and meet without strain. Sees a roof float. He opens his eyes and whispers to no one, "I'll learn how." Behind him, bells call the monks to prime. Ahead, a world pulls tight as a bowstring. Jack rises, shoulders the basket, and walks back to work. A boy already listening to the language of stone, already translating it into a future only a few can imagine. In a land lit by fire and ruled by hunger, a quiet vow takes root, small as a seed now, strong as an oak in time. The mists of morning drift above Kingsbridge, wrapping the priory in a pale shroud. The monks move like shadows across the cloister, sandals whispering on stone, their chants rising and falling with the rhythm of bells. You walk beside Prior Philip, a man not of power or birth, but of iron will and quiet certainty. His robes are patched, his meals meager, yet his eyes carry a fire that few notice until it burns them. He is young for a prior, chosen for his honesty, his discipline, and the strange clarity with which he sees God's purpose in every stone and stream. Philip does not seek wealth for himself. His hunger is for order, for a world less cruel, less given over to the chaos of warlords and greedy bishops. He dreams of a cathedral rising from the ashes of the priory's crumbling church. Not a squat, shadowed thing like the old one, but a monument of light, a house of God so radiant that pilgrims would walk from distant shires to marvel, to pray, to give. With the alms of the faithful, the priory would prosper, and with prosperity would come peace. That is Philip's vision, a holy fortress against the storm of anarchy sweeping England. Yet not all monks share his faith or his hunger for renewal. In the dim refectory, Brother Remigius eyes Philip with thin-lipped disapproval. To him, Philip's youth is weakness, his honesty a danger. Monks should guard their privileges, not spend their lives on stones and dreams. When Philip speaks of rebuilding, some murmur prayers of assent, others frown into their bread. Division is already here, seeded like weeds between the paving stones. Still, Fate moves in his favor. Tom Builder's arrival, gaunt and desperate, feels like an answer to unspoken prayer. When Tom unrolls his rough sketches on a wooden table, the lines leap from the page, arches that soar, ribs that carry weight with grace, a nave that seems to lift the soul as much as the body. Philip sees not just a mason, but a man whose hunger has been forged into vision. He sees the hand that might raise the temple he imagines, but outside these cloisters another man schemes. Bishop Walleran Bigod, a creature of cunning and calculation, wears humility like a mask. His eyes are pale and cold, his words smooth with sanctity yet sharpened with ambition. To him, a cathedral is not God's house but a weapon, an emblem of power, a banner planted in stone. He sees in Philip a rival too earnest to be trusted. He sees in Kingsbridge's ruin an opportunity for control, and when he looks at William Hamleigh, cruel and eager to serve, he sees a useful blade. William himself rides across his stolen lands with a grin that does not soften his brutish face. He dreams of a castle, a fortress to match his father's ambition, a monument not of light but of fear. Where Tom dreams of arches that soar, William dreams of walls that crush. His cruelty is a tool, his violence a language, and he too seeks a builder. When Tom's talents come to his attention, William believes he has found the mason who can build his tower of power. Tom stands at the edge of two destinies. One path leads to a cathedral that will pierce heaven, a labor of faith and beauty, a promise of endurance beyond war. The other leads to a castle of cruelty, a fortress built to dominate and oppress. Hunger gnaws at him. His children cry at night. The dream of a cathedral seems distant, perhaps foolish, but the fire in Philip's eyes mirrors the fire in Tom's heart. And so, in the cold shadow of the ruined church, Tom makes his choice. He will build for God. The first stones are hauled from the quarry. The sound of chisels rings through the valley, sharp and hopeful. Men bend their backs, ropes groan, oxen strain. A skeleton of wood and stone begins to rise. The townsfolk gather, some skeptical, some awed. They see the outline of something vast, something that promises more than shelter from the rain. They see the possibility that Kingsbridge, once a backwater, might become a place where pilgrims come and coins flow, where the future can be carved one stone at a time. Yet every rising wall casts a longer shadow. Walleran Bigod whispers poison into ears at court, sowing doubt about Philip's claim to the site. William Hamleigh sharpens his wrath, convinced that Kingsbridge's cathedral is an insult to his family's power. To crush the town would be easy for him, to humiliate Philip would be a pleasure. And so, even as hammers echo and dust fills the air, you feel the tension coil tighter, as if every stone laid is also a challenge thrown at the enemies who circle like wolves. For now, though, the dream lives. Tom's hands, raw and calloused, guide the work. Jack, his young apprentice, learns to set stone, to balance weight with grace. Ellen moves through the building site like a ghost from another world, her wild hair catching the light, her words sharp as flint, her presence both solace and danger. And in the priory, the orphan Jonathan grows, cared for by monks who see him as one of their own. In the midst of grief and famine, a foundation has been laid. A dream has found soil. But the soil of England is watered with blood, and the storm of war is rising fast. It begins with a spark so small no one sees it. A taper left too near a frayed banner. A brazier fed with resinous chips because the morning is knife cold. In the nave of the old Kingsbridge church, the air is thick with candle smoke and the scent of damp straw that has lined the aisles since Michaelmas. The choir's voices ride the chill, thin but steady, when one wavering tongue of flame licks rafters tired by centuries. A pop, a whisper, a rush of breath. Then, as if the building itself exhales, fire runs along the beam like a fox along a hedge. You feel it before you see it. A sudden heat at your cheek. A ripple of silence through the monks, a single broken note that drops and shatters. Someone shouts. Someone else points upward with a hand that trembles. The old roof, patched a dozen times, thatched and timbered in the old way, takes the fire into itself. Sparks fall like angry stars. Philip is on his feet before the first ember lands. "Buckets," he says, not loudly, but the word moves like a commandment. The brothers run. Novices upend tubs. Lay workers form a line from the well. The bell tolls a cry across Kingsbridge, and townsfolk spill from doors with pails and skins, feet skidding on frost as they race for the priory yard. The sound is everywhere at once. Bells, feet, shouted names, the crackle above like a forest in dry weather. Tom is among the first through the west door, eyes already estimating, already choosing. Smoke curls along the rafters in gray ribbons. "Pull down the straw," he shouts, and men kick and sweep, clearing the aisles so fire cannot feed downward. He points. "You ladders, you break the screen to get at the south pier." He does not ask if he may command in God's house. He commands because physics does not wait for permission. Jack is at his side without being called. He ties a wet cloth over his mouth the way Ellen taught him, and shoulders a ladder with a boy's agility and a grown man's purpose. Alfred grabs the other end, face set, and for a moment the two move as one, weight shared, purpose clear. They slam the ladder against the gallery and climb into smoke that stings the eyes and claws the throat. Jack pulls free a burning banner and hurls it down. Alfred stamps the embers to black. Outside, the line from the well snakes and heaves. Water sloshes. Men and women pass buckets hand to hand in a rhythm older than prayer. Philip moves among them, sleeves wet, face streaked, passing pails when his arms are needed, and words when they are. "Steady," he says. "We will save what can be saved." Remigius, sour and pale, protests that the choir books must be carried to safety at once. Philip nods once. Two brothers peel away to lift the heavy volumes in careful arms. A beam splits with a sound like a tree giving way in winter. Heads tilt up together as if joined. Jack flattens to the gallery as a shower of sparks roars past, heat blasting the hair at his forearms to crisp. Tom's voice cuts through the thunder. "Down!" He points to the nave. "Clear it!" Philip repeats him, a second bell. The line breaks and reforms at the doors. The roof groans, the old timber complaining, then taking a long decision. Another beam lets go and fire drops, hungry and red. They do not save the roof. No one could. But they save the walls, the piers, the eastern apse where light used to pool in the mornings like gold spilled from a careful hand. They save, too, more than a few souls who would have lingered until smoke folded them down like laundry. When the last hiss dies and the last black ribbon of smoke unwinds into the white sky, the church stands roofless, naked to the cold and the gaze of 100 stunned faces. Silence arrives as quickly as the flames did. It is a silence made of wet wool and scorched oak, of tears drying into salt. Then the murmurs begin, the old questions with new urgency. Who lit the taper? Who left the brazier? Was it accident? Was it God's hand, or a worse hand? Rumor always runs to the darkest corner first. Some eyes turn furtive toward Ellen at the edge of the yard, her hair wild, her face set. She meets no one's gaze. Jack, soot-streaked, straightens beside her, not defiant, simply present. Philip steps onto a stone with the care of a man who knows words can build or break. He looks at the burned core of his priory, then at the town he means to save with order and work. "Brothers, friends," he says, "we have lost a roof. We have not lost our purpose." He lets that rest in the air, then goes on, voice gaining torque. "This church was failing. We patched it. We made do. We asked it to carry more years than it could. Today's fire ended what should have ended long ago. We will not replace a carcass with another carcass. We will raise a house of God that will stand when our bones are dust. It is not the voice of a man who begs. It is the voice of a man who is already chosen. Heads lift. People who came only to pass buckets and stare now lean forward as if warmed from within. A woman who sells yarn nods once, as if haggling is over. Tom feels the words land in his chest and finds that his hands, which have spent years proving things to stone, are shaking. By afternoon, the talk has hardened from shock into plan. Tom walks the blackened nave with a mason's eye, tapping survivors with his mallet. Ashlar can be cleaned. Piers that have drunk heat must be tested. He marks stones with a chalk cross or a circle. Jack follows him, taking his measure without words. Alfred lingers at the edges, expression tight, pride stung by the look Tom gives the boy who is not his blood. Philip summons the priory's reeve and the town's elders to the chapter house. Inside, smoke still clings to clothing and hair. Numbers come out. Grain in the store, rents due, the last year's alms. Timber rights discussed. Quarrying at the old pit upriver. Carts, men's backs. Walleran Bigod's name appears in the room even before he does, his influence a draft under the door. He will want control, Remigius warns. Philip nods, as if he has been expecting a knock. At dusk, the bishop arrives like a shadow that has learned to smile. Walleran tours the ruin with hands folded and eyes that miss nothing. He speaks piously of God's mysterious will, then turns, quick as a hawk, to the matter of episcopal oversight and the need to ensure funds are properly directed. He suggests the cathedral should rise under his guidance, on his terms, with his men counting every coin. Cooperation, he calls it. Philip hears dominion. Tom stands behind the prior, stone dust still white in his hair, and keeps his mouth shut. He is a builder, not a courtier. But he cannot help one glance at the bishop's retinue and the way a huge familiar figure among them slouches with bored cruelty. William Hamleigh stares into the burned nave as if it is a carcass he might kick. When his gaze slides across Tom, the builder feels the old chill of a wolf's interest. Night drops. The priory refectory is crowded, the low ceiling holding in the heat from kettles and the sound of tired voices. Jack's hands still smell of smoke. Ellen sits with her back to a wall, eyes on the door as if she expects something more than wind to come through. Alfred shoves bread into his mouth and stares at the table, jaw working. Philip eats little and speaks less. He is counting. Not coins, he knows he will always have too few of those, but wills. How many men will stay when the winter deepens? How many carts will he find when spring mud swallows wheels? How many hearts he can heat with the idea of a building that will outlast the men who raise it? He thinks of pilgrims climbing a long road, of candles burning under vaults that make music of light, of order like a woven cloth laid over chaos until it stills. Before sleep, Tom walks once more among the blackened stones. The sky above the roofless nave is salted with stars. He closes his eyes and imagines ribs meeting without strain, imagined light pressed into glass so blue it feels like the edge of heaven. He hears a footstep and opens his eyes to find Jack beside him, silent and awake. "You see it too," Tom says. Jack nods, gaze traveling up through the dark where a vault will be. "We'll need better lines," the boy says almost to himself, "in curves that carry their own weight. Then we'll learn them," Tom answers. Fire has taken the old. Ash marks every sleeve and doorstep. Yet under the char and the fatigue, a fever has caught. The town feels it. The monks feel it. Even the enemies circling taste it and bare their teeth. From ruin, a clean edge has been cut. From loss, a beginning. The ground is cold, the purse is light, and the road ahead is lined with men who prefer the rule of fear to the rule of stone. Still, you can almost hear it now, in the quiet after the flames, a future breathing slow and steady, waiting to be built. The castle walls of Shiring glimmer under a pale sun, but within those walls, shadows gather. You follow Lady Aliena, daughter of the proud Earl Bartholomew, as she paces her father's hall with restless steps. Her world has always been one of tapestries and feasts, of suitors who come bearing gifts and flattery. But beneath her calm poise lives a spirit like tempered steel. She knows she is her father's hope, the promise that his line will endure through her brother Richard. For Richard is still a boy, wide-eyed and eager, and Bartholomew's enemies wait like hounds for weakness. When the Empress Maud demands loyalty in her struggle for the throne, Bartholomew does not hesitate. He has always despised the Hamleighs, crude upstarts who clawed their way into nobility, and he chooses to back the rightful heir, the king's daughter. It is a choice that makes him a target. On a day thick with dust and heat, soldiers surround Shiring Castle. The Hamleighs have struck swiftly, their banners blotting the horizon, their iron ringing on the gates. The siege is short. The Earl is dragged away in chains, his lands declared forfeit. Aliena is torn from her chamber with her brother at her side. William Hamleigh appears in the wreckage of her home, his face flushed with triumph, his hands twitching with hunger. He tells her she will be his bride now, that her father's defiance has given him rights over her body. Aliena's refusal is sharp as a blade. She looks him in the eye, the same eyes that turned cold at her rejection months before, and spits her answer. William's pride, already raw from the humiliation, curdles into cruelty. What follows is not just vengeance, but desecration, a violation meant to break her spirit as much as her body. You turn away, yet the cries echo. Richard clutches his sister's hand in the aftermath, his young face hollowed by grief and helpless fury. Their father rots in a dungeon. Their castle is gone. Their mother has fled. Everything that named them noble has been torn from them in a single day. Aliena kneels in the ashes of her old life, hair tangled, eyes wet but burning, and makes a vow that will shape her years to come. She swears to her father through iron bars and the stink of a cell that she will protect Richard, that she will see him restored to his birthright as Earl of Shiring. To keep that oath, she must trade comfort for hardship. She leads Richard from the ruined halls, carrying nothing but her will. The world outside has no mercy for fallen nobility. Merchants who once bowed now turn their backs. Friends close their doors. Hunger waits at every crossroads, and William's shadow falls long across their path. Yet Aliena refuses to bend. If she must work with her hands, she will. If she must sell wool in the market, haggle with men who once sought her hand, she will do it. She teaches herself the rhythms of trade, the weight of fleece, the truth of profit and loss. Pride smolders in her chest, not as vanity but as defiance. She will not let her brother starve. She will not let their name vanish into dust. In Kingsbridge, the sound of hammers begins to echo over the valley. Tom Builder oversees the first stones of the new foundation. He works with a patience born of suffering, coaxing order out of chaos. Jack, silent and watchful, learns the craft with uncanny speed. His hands, so small yet so certain, carve figures that seem almost alive. Ellen watches from the edges, her gaze both fierce and tender, as if she sees more than stone rising. Perhaps the faint outline of a destiny too vast for her son to name. Paths that seem separate begin to bend toward one another. Aliena, now hardened by necessity, arrives in Kingsbridge to sell her wool. Her eyes scan the marketplace, wary of laughter and whispers. She feels the sting of her fall from nobility in every turned shoulder. Yet she stands tall, brother at her side, her vow unbroken. It is here, among the stalls of rough cloth and the scent of lanolin and smoke, that she first notices the red-haired boy who carves lions into stone as if he were born to it. Jack lifts his head, green eyes locking with hers, and something wordless passes between them. But before love can kindle, more shadows move. William Hamleigh, thwarted and humiliated, returns again and again, leaving fields trampled, women weeping, and barns burned to cinders. His lust for Aliena curdles into a need to destroy her. He watches Kingsbridge with the same hunger he once turned on her. He dreams of building a fortress to dominate, a tower that casts its shadow over every rival. For that, he needs a builder, and his eyes turn once again toward Tom. The world is torn between visions, one of light, one of terror. Philip clings to faith, Tom clings to stone, Aliena clings to her vow, Jack clings to knowledge, learning to read the secrets of cathedrals long crumbled. And William, in his darkness, clings to power by any means, a beast in the skin of a nobleman. In the wreckage of burned beams, among the cries of the hungry and the whispers of betrayal, you feel the slow, patient heartbeat of something greater. A cathedral is beginning, not in stone alone, but in vows made at gravesides, in hunger endured without surrender, in visions carried by those the world would rather see broken. The fire that destroyed Kingsbridge's old church has lit something no water can quench. On a raw morning thick with stable stink and frost, William Hamleigh eats like a hound at his father's board, tearing bread, slopping gravy, laughing too loud at his own stories of broken doors and weeping men. His mother, Regan, watches with a gaze that could cut hide from bone. Where William is clumsy force, Regan is edge and calculation, a woman who learned long ago that in a world owned by men the mind must be the sharper blade. When the servants melt away, she leans in and speaks in the low, steady voice he obeys without knowing why. "A lord is not loved," she says. "He is feared. Leave witnesses. They do the work for you." Bishop Walleran arrives before the embers die to ash. He kneels with great humility and rises with none. He praises the Hamleighs' loyalty to King Stephen, murmurs darkly about traitors who whisper Maud's name, and turns his pale eyes toward Shiring and Kingsbridge. "The priory grows bold," he says almost idly. "Philip the upstart dreams of a cathedral, and pilgrims' coins will follow. Whoever holds Kingsbridge will hold a river of silver." William hears silver and hold and grins. Regan hears the rest. How a bishop can make or unmake a prior, how a market charter can shift the weight of a whole shire, how power travels in parchments as surely as in spears. So William rides. The land shudders when he passes. He is not a general, not even a clever raider, but he is tireless in his appetite. Barns flame like torches in his wake. Gates sag. Men drop their eyes because to meet his gaze is to be marked. He calls it justice, he calls it order, it is hunger with a title. Kingsbridge lives under that shadow but refuses to lie down. The Fleece Fair, once a modest tangle of stalls, begins to swell. Aliena stands at its center, wrapped in plain wool, chin lifted. She has learned the weight of a good fleece in her hands, the difference between lanolin rich and dry, the way merchants try to shave a coin with a shrug. She speaks in a voice that does not rise even when a buyer presses too hard. "Fair price," she says. "Or walk." Richard learns to count behind her shoulder and to keep steel bright. Their father's name has been stripped from parchment, but their oath still breathes. Tom Builder keeps time by stone, morning chalk marks. Noon mallet rhythm. Evening timber lists by candlelight. He cannot soften the world, but he can true a line. Jack becomes his shadow, the boy's thought and hand growing quick together. He learns how to tease curve from stubborn blocks, how to hide strength inside grace, how to make a joint that holds because it wants to. Alfred works too, sullen and strong, splitting wedges with blows that ring across the yard. When Tom praises good work, Alfred hears favor and Jack hears instruction. They are not the same thing, and the difference gnaws at both. Prior Philip moves as quietly as water-wearing rock. He bargains for timber rights upriver, for quarry days, for cartage over rutted lanes, and always for permission. written, sealed, unambiguous. He writes to the royal court and then goes himself, humble robe dusty from the road, to stand where magnates jostle like oxen and bishops prick each other with needles hidden in smiles. Walleran is there, of course, speaking of obedience and the danger of priors who act without episcopal wisdom. Philip bows. He waits. When Stephen's clerks finally look up, Philip asks for a charter to hold an annual fair in Kingsbridge. He speaks of pilgrims, of order, of the king's peace strengthened by prosperity. Walleran's mouth tightens. Regan has taught William to conquer with fire. Philip means to conquer with parchment. News outruns horses. When word reaches Shiring that the king has granted Kingsbridge a market charter, William rages like a child who has found his toy in another boy's hands. The fleece money will go to that sheepfold of monks, not to his coffers. Regan does not shout. She thinks. Take back what a seal has given with steel, she says, but do it where the king cannot see you do it. A lesson, not a scandal. The lesson falls on a bright morning when the fair spills like a festival across the meadow. Stalls gleam with cloth. Scales clink. Aliena's booth hums with buyers who know she brings good fleece. Jack, sent with a message to Tom, stops between stalls to stare at a wine glass that catches sun and turns it to red flame. The beauty of it pierces him. Then the glass shivers at a distant thud. William's men come in a dark ribbon along the lane, hooves already muddy, faces wrapped against dust and recognition. They ride straight through the first line of stalls, canvas bursting, poles snapping, the air filling with the sour stink of crushed apples and fear. By order of the Earl of Shiring, a voice calls, though no such order exists in ink. Some run, some freeze. One man reaches for a cudgel and goes down under 3 mailed fists. Aliena does not run. She shoves Richard behind her and throws a bolt across her stall's front as if a bar of wood mattered against mounted men. William sees her. For a moment the fair falls away and there is only his old humiliation rearing up like a beast. He spurs forward. Richard steps out with a sword too long for his arm and the bright ignorance of the very young. He lasts 3 strokes before a mace knocks him to his knees. William laughs and leans from the saddle to snarl words only Aliena hears. She does not flinch. She looks past him to where townsfolk, frightened but many, begin to gather with poles and stones. Hammers ring from the building yard. Tom hears the change in the sound the way a shepherd knows the tone of a flock's panic. He does not hesitate. Tools down, he says. Pikes and mallets, with me. Jack grabs a long-handled hammer and a length of scaffold rope. Alfred takes a timber hook and bares his teeth. The masons move, not soldiers, but men who lift for a living and know how to stand shoulder to shoulder. They do not win by cleverness. They win by being unwilling to give. When William's men lunge at the wool stalls, they find a line of stonemasons who plant their feet like piers. A horse that surges into a crowd finds rope around its fetlock, a hammer at its muzzle, hands on its bridle, dragging its head down. Jack moves like a fox, all angles and nerve, darting, tripping, yanking, vanishing before a blow can find him. Alfred wades in with his hook and an oath. And for one brief, bright moment, the brothers face the same direction and are useful to each other. Philip stands in the center of the churn, bareheaded, voice lifted but not shouting. "This is the king's fair," he says over and over as if words can nail a truth to the air. "Violence here is violence against the crown. It is not a spell, but it is a net, catching the attention of men who may prefer coin tomorrow to blood today." Walleran would call it theater. Philip would call it order claimed in the teeth of chaos. William does not stay to be tangled. He takes what he came to take: terror, wreckage, humiliation paid back in broken stalls and scattered goods. He wheels his horse and is gone, leaving a meadow that looks like a battlefield and a town that tastes copper and smoke but still stands. After there is the weary counting. How much fleece is ruined, how many hands broken, how many boys too shaken to sleep. Aliena goes stall to stall, face calm, voice steady, buying what she can with coin she needs for Richard's future, because ruin spreads if you let it. She gives a price that is never unfair. Men who thought of her as a fallen lady now see a merchant who pays promptly and asks no pity. Tom walks the fairground like a surveyor after a flood. He is not a man for speeches, but he knows what men do when they are hurt. They pull back, they promise less, they hoard. So he sets a date. 3 days, he says to his crew. We'll clear this ground and set new stakes. The work goes on. He does not say that the work is the only answer he has to men like William. He does not need to. That night, William drinks himself past sense and wakes before dawn with a taste like iron in his mouth. Regan is already seated, hair smooth, hands clean. You bloodied them, she says. Good. Now build something they cannot ignore. She wants a keep on the ridge that can be seen from the river, a stone sentence turned toward Kingsbridge. For that he needs a builder with vision. He wants Tom because even William can see that the lines at Kingsbridge do not fight gravity. They speak it. He sends a message. Tom listens to the offer in a drafty hall that smells of rushes and old meat. The pay is heavy. The promise of protection is heavier. William's eyes gleam with a boy's anticipation of a new toy he means to break. Tom feels a muscle jump in his jaw. He thinks of Philip's steady hand, of light caught in glass, of a nave wide as a field. No, he says. He does not add, never. He does not bow. William's face closes like a fist. Retaliation follows in smaller, meaner bites. Cart axles broken at night, a quarry track fouled, a timber raft cut loose to drift. Nothing that can be proved. Everything that takes time and money to mend. Walleran visits the priory with condolences and questions about whether a prior as young as Philip should carry such burdens alone. Regan dines with a sheriff who owes her a debt and leaves him with a handful of carefully chosen doubts. Fear is a craft in this family, practiced and passed down like a crest. And still the bells ring. Still the line of stone creeps higher, slow as winter dawn. Still a boy with red hair runs a palm across a curve and feels for a moment how weight and light can make a truce. The ruthless rule by making the world smaller. In Kingsbridge, against odds that grow sharper by the day, men and women choose to make it larger. With vows kept, with merchant scales balanced, with stones set true. William rides and rages, the town breathes and builds. The walls rise like patient giants, gray stone stacked upon gray stone, mortared with sweat, hope, and hunger. You hear the steady rhythm of chisels and hammers, the rasp of saws biting through oak, the groan of ropes pulling blocks from carts to scaffold. Kingsbridge begins to change shape, not just in its bones but in its soul. Where once stood a modest crumbling church, now there are outlines of soaring piers, arches that hint at something greater. A dream solidifying in mortar. For Tom, every curve and line is a prayer. For Philip, each stone is a step toward God's kingdom on earth. For Jack, the boy with eyes like green fire, the rising walls are a puzzle to be solved, a riddle in geometry and grace. But beauty never rises unchallenged. Shadows stir at the edges of the valley. Outlaws stalk the forests, lean men with eyes hollow from hunger, knives flashing in the undergrowth. Sometimes they steal sheep, sometimes grain, sometimes children. Mothers pull their little ones inside when dusk falls, but fear still prowls the lanes. Whispers spread that Ellen's wild kin may be among them, for her past is tangled with those who live outside law. She does not deny it. When pressed, she says only, "The forest shelters who it will. Better to fear the men who rule than those who hide." Her words sting, for all know she means William Hamleigh. William's cruelty is no longer rumor. You watch him storm through villages, sword raised, laughter raw. He is not clever, but he is relentless, and when he cannot win through law or parchment, he wins through terror. Smoke stains the horizon where his men torch cottages and trample fields. Farmers kneel in mud, weeping over blackened wheat that once promised bread. To William, each burned field is proof of his strength. To Aliena, it is a knife in her vow. Every fleece she gathers at market is threatened by his hunger. Every coin she saves for Richard's future can be stolen by William's men in a single raid. One night the terror comes close. Tom and his crew are laboring by torchlight to set a great arch, the stones massive, the timber scaffold creaking under weight. Jack works by his side, hands chalked white. Alfred heaves at a block, sweat streaking soot across his broad face. Then the shouts rise from the town, the dull roar of panic carried on the night wind. "Fire!" someone screams. "They're burning the grain! They're 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 burning the grain!" The masons drop their tools. Tom's first thought is not of bread, not of coin, but of the half-built wall swaying above their heads. He shouts for the ropes to be held, the wedges braced. Jack scrambles upward, tying knots with quick, sure hands. The beam steadies, groans, then holds. Only then do they run toward the fire. The meadow is chaos. Flames leap from cart to cart, wool bales bursting like torches, their greasy smoke rolling over the town. Aliena is there, her hands raw from trying to drag sacks to safety. Richard swings his sword wildly at shadows, his voice breaking between boyhood and command. William's men ride through the smoke, laughing, scattering merchants, cutting ropes, spilling goods. Their armor gleams red in the firelight, their faces hidden behind steel. Aliena sees William himself, looming in the haze. His eyes fix on her, hungry and cruel. She grips a knife, though she knows it is useless against him. Yet she will not kneel, not now, not ever. Her oath to her father burns in her chest. She will protect Richard. She will see their family's name restored, even if her body breaks in the attempt. Jack finds her there, his face smeared black, his eyes wide with a fury too old for a boy his age. He swings his hammer at a raider's knee, dropping the man into the mud, then drags Aliena and Richard toward the shadows of the priory walls. For a moment she looks at him and something stirs. Not gratitude alone, not relief alone, but recognition, as if she sees the same fire she carries reflected in this strange boy's gaze. When the flames die and the smoke thins, the meadow is a ruin. The fleece is gone. The merchants broken, but the people of Kingsbridge have not fled. They walk among the ashes, counting losses, lifting what can be saved. Philip moves quietly, speaking hope into every ear, his words measured steady, each one a stone set against despair. "The cathedral will rise," he says, "and with it we will rise," but envy has already burrowed deep. In the dim light of the chapter house, Remigius whispers doubts about Philip's ambition, his pride, his recklessness. He would build a monument while our bellies are empty. Walleran Bigod listens with pale, hooded eyes. He has already set snares at court, already whispered that Kingsbridge's fare weakens the king's allies. He smiles, the corners of his lips barely lifting, as if the cathedral's rising is a game he means to win by patience and poison. For Tom, the weeks that follow are a trial by hunger. Wages are thin, the work is backbreaking. His hands split until blood smears stone, yet he does not stop. He thinks of Agnes, of the child left in Philip's care, of the vision that will not leave him. He dreams arches that catch the weight of heaven itself and make it sing. When he looks at Jack carving a grotesque with uncanny skill, he feels a strange pride, sharp as grief, bright as hope. Alfred scowls, but Tom cannot help it. The boy carves what Tom has only imagined, and the stone listens. Ellen watches silent, as if she already knows what Jack will become. Sometimes she vanishes into the forest, returning with herbs, berries, or meat. Sometimes she stares into the flames and murmurs curses against priests and lords. When she speaks of the bishop who once condemned her lover, her voice hardens into iron. "He builds prisons, not churches," she says. Jack listens, storing the words like chisels in a bag, not knowing yet when he will use them. The cathedral's skeleton grows, but with every beam raised, with every arch traced, the dangers grow too. Kingsbridge is no longer invisible. Pilgrims arrive even to see the ruin, bringing coins, prayers, and whispers. And William Hamleigh, watching from the ridge with his mother at his side, feels the old rage rise like bile. To him, the cathedral is not a prayer, but an insult, a stone reminder that Aliena defied him, that Philip defied him, that Tom turned away from him. Regan leans forward in her saddle, her voice low and sure. "You burn their barns, they rebuild. You break their carts, they mend. You must strike where they cannot rebuild. Stone, timber, dream." The meadow grows quiet again, but not with peace. It is the silence before another blow. You feel the tension coil like rope before it snaps. The cathedral rises in beauty, but already the air smells faintly of ash, as if fire waits for its moment. The days stretch into years, and the bare bones of stone become walls that catch the morning sun. You walk through the growing skeleton of Kingsbridge Cathedral, and already the air feels different here. Open, rising, touched with light. Among the scaffolds and half-finished arches moves Jack, no longer just Ellen's silent boy of the forest, but a young man with hands scarred by chisels and eyes lit by a mind that sees beauty where others see only stone. He has grown tall, lean, his red hair aflame against the gray dust. He works beside Tom, who guides him with patient gestures, showing him how to measure, how to listen for the song of stone beneath the chisel's bite. And though Alfred is older, broader, stronger, Jack's hands reveal a gift that cannot be denied. Where Alfred chips, Jack sculpts. Where Alfred builds walls that stand heavy and plain, Jack draws curves that seem to breathe. The cathedral, even in its half-born state, already whispers of him. In the marketplace, Aliena's stall grows crowded. She has learned to master the world of trade as if she were born to it. Her ledgers neat, her words sharp. She bargains with merchants twice her age, never yielding a coin she cannot afford. Richard, now a youth with restless eyes, practices swordplay in the meadow, his strikes wild but growing steadier. Aliena watches him with a mixture of pride and worry, for her vow to her father still burns. She will see this boy restored as Earl of Shiring, no matter the cost to herself. It is here, between bolts of fleece and the shouts of buyers, that Aliena sees Jack again. He comes to her stall carrying a stone lion he carved, its mane curling like fire. He places it on the table without a word, his green eyes flicking to hers, then away. She laughs softly, not because it is foolish, but because no one has dared give her a gift in years. She touches the stone, her fingers brushing the carved mane, and for the first time since her father's fall, she feels a warmth that is not duty but something deeper. Their bond grows in shadows and whispers. Jack shows her the half-built arches of the cathedral, explaining how stone can be coaxed to fly, how light can be shaped like music. Aliena listens, the cold weight of her vow to Richard still in her heart, but her eyes soften when Jack speaks, her laughter breaking through the armor she has built. Yet love in this world is a dangerous gift. Aliena is still bound by the oath she made to her father, and that oath demands sacrifice. To rebuild Richard's inheritance, she has promised not to marry until he is restored as Earl. Love with Jack would be betrayal, and so she holds herself back, even as her heart pulls forward. Jack, too, feels the weight of silence. He knows his mother's curses, knows the whispers of witchcraft that follow her through the priory's lanes. He knows he is no lord, no heir, only a builder's stepson with a head full of dreams. Then comes a day when their restraint shatters. You walk with them through the half-finished cathedral, scaffolding rising like ribs around them, shafts of sunlight falling in golden blades. The great stones smell of dust and rain. Jack shows her a carving of Eve, delicate as a living woman, eyes lifted as if she questions God himself. Aliena's hand lingers on the curve of the stone, then on his arm, then on his face. The silence that is stretched between them breaks, and in its place comes a rush of heat and longing that neither can hold back. For a moment the vow is forgotten, drowned in the fire of love and the promise of something larger than duty, but vows are not easily silenced. The morning after, Aliena's guilt crashes down like falling timber. She remembers her father's voice, the iron bars, the promise she swore to keep Richard safe, to restore his name. She tells Jack it cannot be, that she belongs not to herself but to her oath. Jack listens, jaw tight, eyes burning with a grief deeper than any boy should bear. He does not argue. He turns and walks away, leaving her in the half-light of the cathedral that was to be their dream together. Meanwhile, William Hamleigh broods in his fortress, anger rising with every stone laid in Kingsbridge. The cathedral's walls mock him, its arches sneer at him. His castle, heavy and dark, seems to shrink beside the vision of light that climbs from the priory meadow. His mother's words gnaw at him like a rat at a door. "You are not feared enough," she whispers. So William rides again, leaving behind corpses in fields, spreading terror as if it were seed. The cathedral becomes both beacon and target. Each new course of stone is sabotaged, scaffolds cut, carts overturned. Hunger grips the town. Aliena sees her hard-won wealth vanish in smoke and theft, yet still she bargains, still she works, still she gathers coin for Richard's claim. Jack, restless, turns inward, carving saints whose faces look like hers, angels whose eyes hold the same fire. He loves her with the same quiet persistence with which Tom lays stone, but in the clash between vows and longing, between faith and cruelty, between dream and ruin, something must break. Aliena's oath binds her to a path of sacrifice. Jack's heart pulls him toward her with the inevitability of gravity. William's rage drives him to crush whatever stands in his way. And Tom, at the center, hears the cathedral groan under the strain of sabotage and hunger, yet still believes in a dream that can outlast all of them. The meadow is scarred by fire. The townsfolk are bruised and weary. The monks whisper doubts, but when the sun rises and spills light across the half-built arches, the stones themselves seem to sing. You feel it in your chest, a slow hum of defiance. The cathedral is rising, stone, blood, and betrayal all mortared together, and though the shadows deepen, the dream has not yet fallen. Winter takes the color out of Kingsbridge, and with it something in Jack goes gray. Alfred's envy hardens into accusation. A scaffolding joint fails after a rain, and though no one is hurt, the whisper moves fast. Jack cut corners, Jack risked lives, Jack thinks rules are for lesser men. Remigius repeats it where it will sour. Walleran tilts a story so it sounds like fact, and William's coin finds a drunk who swears he saw the red-haired mason meddling by torchlight. Philip searches for truth. Tom swears for the boy, but order demands calm, and Alfred promises it. Make him master, some say, and the grudge will cool. The vote goes to Alfred. The air goes out of Jack like a bellows kicked. He does not shout. He packs his tools, the compass Tom gave him, a knife Ellen honed to a razor, and a small carving of a woman's face that looks like Aliena when she is trying not to smile. He leaves before dawn, the priory bells still silent. Ellen stands in the lane, hair wild, eyes steady. Learn everything, she says. Come back with proof. She does not add of what. He nods once and walks into a wind that smells of river and far roads, across hedged fields and chalk lanes to the coast where the sea lifts like iron and gulls cry as if warning him back. He finds a ship by paying with work. Tar under his nails, rope burns along his palms, salt in every crack of skin. The channel takes him in a gray heave, then spits him out on a French shore where the words tilt and the bread is harder and the rules are the same. He walks, he watches, he listens for stone. Paris thunders like a forge. Carts rattle over bridges, water wheels turn, knife grinders sing to sell the edge. Above it all rises an abbey church unlike any Jack has seen. He stares up at Saint-Denis until his neck aches. The west front answers sky with geometry, not brawn. Inside, light stands up in colored sheets so blue it could drown a man. Ribs spring from columns like branches, meet clean and carry weight as if weight were a thought rather than a burden. The pointed arch does not hunch. It leans into heaven and holds. A monk with ink-black fingers sees the boy who cannot stop looking. Geometry is prayer, the man says half to himself and shows Jack a parchment where circles hatch inside triangles, where ratios breathe. Jack copies figures late into the night, the curves already living in his hand. In a builder's yard beyond the river, he runs his palm over a rib vault under assembly and feels the difference in the bones. Thrust tamed, line truer, mass less for the same strength. He begs for labor and earns it by outworking men twice his size. He learns names: Impost, Springer, Boss, Webb. He learns that flying buttresses are not wings but levers you park outside so the inside can stay all light. He follows rumor as if it were a road. Chartres, where glassmakers coax night sky out of sand, ash, and fire. He stands in a low furnace room with sweat running down his back and watches a master blow a gather until it balloons, spin it, and cool it into a flat disk the color of deep water. Lead cames stitched around the panes hold them the way fingers hold a note. Jack trades 7 days of hauling for a day at the table, learning to cut with a hot iron, to follow a cartoon, to fit a face out of slivers until it looks as if it might speak. Blue, he says, touching the sheet when no one looks. We'll need this blue, east and south, because stories drift that way about arches sharpened to points long before Paris named them, about builders who claim the line is older than Rome. He joins pilgrims bound for Santiago, sleeps under porches, walks until his feet bleed, and at a crossroads market near Toulouse listens to men arguing over triangles with more heat than over God. In Aragon he works on a bridge where the pier cutwaters are sharp, and the stones on the downstream face are set like fish scales to shed force. In Toledo he slips into a courtyard where workmen from 3 faiths lay out a plan in dust. One draws circles. One recites a list of lengths that sound like poetry. One checks a column by letting a plumb line kiss it. Jack says little. He watches how the pointed arch divides a load, how a thin wall can stand if the line of force is honest. Nights he hunts a different quarry. Ellen's old stories point toward a name swallowed by the sea, a jongleur who loved a woman and was hanged for a crime that tasted like another man's lie. Jack looks for a trace in taverns where sailors drink until they sing, in cloisters where the old keep too much in their heads, in ports where news comes salted. At Cherbourg, a gray-bearded fisherman remembers the wreck that cracked a kingdom, the white ship, too fine, too fast, too full of lords, and swears some who survived were hunted as if living itself were theft. A bishop with eyes like ice, the man says, touching his own lids. He wanted a story that fit his power. The tale runs ahead of him. At Barfleur, a woman shows him a coin bitten out of silver and struck with a crowned head, a keepsake her father took from a stranger who washed ashore that winter, and who begged for a priest before he died of fever. The stranger carried a sealed parchment bag that 2 clerics seized and carried off. One wore a ring with a crooked cross, she says. He did not look at the drowning as if they were humans. The shape of the ring scratches at Jack's mind like a thorn. He has seen it. On Waileran's hand, in a Kingsbridge chapter house gleaming when the bishop folded pious fingers and spoke about obedience, the hanged man in Ellen's tale begins to throw a longer shadow. In a priory near Caen, an old sacrist leans close to Jack's face as if reading his bones. "You're the image of him," the man says softly. "Red hair like flame. He came here once with a woman and a babe at her breast and asked for shelter. He played a tune that made the brothers weep. Later he was accused of stealing a chain from a drunken lord. He laughed. The bishop did not. The sacrist coughs, digs in a chest, and produces a scrap of leather pressed around a sliver of driftwood carved with a ship that lists hard to one side. He left this for the boy, the sacrist says, a charm against the sea. Jack holds the little ship until the edges bite his palm. The pieces he has been gathering for years begin to lean into each other. If Waleran helped hang an innocent man to close the story of a drowned prince and a lost royal treasure, the rope is still tight around Jack's life. Tom's dream was nearly strangled by that rope. Ellen's rage was born in that noose. Kingsbridge's enemies use the same cold lies now, wrapped in different ribbon. "Proof," his mother said. "He needs proof he can carry home and lay like a stone on a table where even a bishop's hand cannot sweep it away. He writes letters for the first time in his life, neat hand learned in scriptoria, to monks and magistrates who owe favors to men he has helped. He copies seals carefully, gathers affidavits that name the winter of the white ship, the priest who boasted of God's justice while his purse sagged, the ring with the crooked cross. He sketches arches in the margins when his hand wants to fly. He fills a purse with wages and the rest with knowledge. Spring in Paris again. At Saint-Denis, scaffolds have crept, windows blaze, and crowds come just to stand inside the light. Jack lays his palm on a pier and feels the load run clean as water to ground. "I can do this," he says aloud, not boast, not prayer. He closes his eyes and draws Kingsbridge in his head with these bones. A nave that lifts like a held breath, ribs that meet without strain, aisles bright as riverbanks. A lantern of blue at the crossing so dawn can pour through like grace. Buttresses set well and true so the inside can be air and song. He turns toward home. Across the channel with a bag of tools and a roll of parchments tied in waxed cloth, with a sliver of carved ship in a pouch at his throat, with glass recipes written in a hand steadier than his steps on a rolling deck. He is leaner. His eyes are older. His mind is wired with new lines. He does not know what will be waiting. Alfred's scowl, Philip's restraint, Waleran's smile, William's fists, Aliena's face. But his feet do not falter. The coast of England rises like a memory. He steps onto shingle and tastes salt and ash, hears in his head the old rhythm of hammers from the Kingsbridge yard. He begins to walk inland through lanes he has known since boyhood and fields marked by old pain. The dream he carries now is heavier and easier both. He has seen proof that stone can fly. He has gathered proof of a crime that once nailed his life to a lie. He means to use both. The years grind forward like the wheels of carts on muddy tracks, and England bleeds. You move among fields stripped bare by soldiers where stubble smolders and children search for grain among the ashes. King Stephen and the Empress Maud pull the kingdom apart, each swearing a crown that will not sit still. To common folk, the names are less important than the hunger, the sudden fire at dawn, the hoofbeats that thunder past their doors. It is a time when loyalty shifts like wind, and the only law that stands is the sword. In Kingsbridge, the cathedral climbs slowly against that backdrop of chaos, its half-built walls a defiance of disorder. To Philip, every course of stone is a prayer for peace. But he knows peace will not come without struggle. He rides to court, a lone monk among armored lords, parchment clutched in his sleeve. There the air is thick with the stink of horses, wax, and ambition. Stephen smiles with tired charm, his crown already heavy on his brow, while his rivals whisper in corners, measuring how long it will sit there. Philip speaks of the priory's need for protection, of a cathedral that would shine like God's promise, drawing pilgrims in silver to strengthen the king's reign. His words are plain, but their very plainness cuts through the court's velvet deceit. Some nobles sneer, others nod, but Walleran Bygod listens most closely. He leans toward Stephen, murmuring with lips that move as if in prayer. Yet every word is poison tipped with strategy. He warns of Philip's ambition, of the danger in letting a minor prior command such wealth and influence. For Walleran, the cathedral is a crown of stone he must seize for himself or shatter if it will not rest on his brow. And William Hamleigh, Walleran's willing weapon, sharpens his cruelty into a blade he can wield without hesitation. In his hall he drills men until they stagger, beats them when they falter, promises them land taken from the weak. His mother Regan watches with the cold satisfaction of one who has staked everything on fear. She reminds him that Kingsbridge's prosperity threatens their claim to shiring. A town with a cathedral is a rival to an earl, she says. Your father is dead, your pride is wounded, and still they build. Tear it down, William, tear it down until they kneel. The struggle spreads like cracks through stone. When the priory wins the right to its annual fair, William strikes back, raiding merchant trains, burning fleece, turning prosperity to smoke. Aliena feels each loss like a lash. Years of toil, days spent measuring wool, nights bargaining for coin, vanish in moments when riders thunder in and scatter her goods. Still, she does not bend. She gathers what remains, bargains harder, teaches Richard to wield his sword with discipline. We will endure, she tells him. We will rise. Yet when she lies awake at night, she remembers Jack's green eyes, his quiet hands shaping stone, and feels her vow like iron around her heart. Jack is far away, walking strange roads, but his presence lingers. In the yard, masons whisper of the red-haired boy who saw lines no master could see. Alfred, now master builder of the cathedral, works with heavy hands and a heavier pride. His walls stand solid but squat, the windows narrow, the arches clumsy. Tom watches silent, his dream dimmed but not extinguished. He remembers the grace of Jack's carvings, the curves that seem to breathe, and he knows what is being built is not the vision he carried all his life. Yet he says nothing, for his children must eat. And the cathedral, imperfect though it may be, is still more than he once dared hope for. Philip feels the weight of the compromises. To fund the work, he must bow at court, must listen to Walleran's poisoned counsel and nod as if it were wisdom. He must endure mutters in his own cloister, Remigius whispering that the prior builds monuments while brothers go hungry. At night, Philip kneels before the altar, roofless still, stars burning where a vault should be, and asks whether obedience to God can survive in a world ruled by cunning and cruelty. And yet, in the daylight, hope refuses to die. Even with William's men skulking the roads, even with famine biting, pilgrims arrive. They come to see the rising skeleton of stone, to touch its piers, to marvel at arches that already stretch higher than the trees. They bring coins, prayers, and the stubborn human belief that beauty matters, even when the world is breaking. The meadow fills with traders, and Aliena's stall hums again. She holds to her vow, gathers fleece, counts coin, shields Richard, and tells herself she can silence her heart. But the threads of fate tighten. Jack, far away, has not forgotten. In Paris, he stands beneath vaults that rise like frozen music and thinks of Kingsbridge. In Spain, he sees arches that divide weight like thought, glass that sings in color, bridges that leap rivers with grace. Each sight is a stone he gathers in his mind to carry home one day. And in every face he carves, in every angel's curve or saint's sorrow, Aliena's eyes appear unbidden. His love is not gone. It is a quiet fire banked waiting. William, meanwhile, cannot endure silence. He rides again, each raid a message, each burned field a word in the only language he knows. But the message is changing. Where once villages fell silent with fear, now whispers of defiance stir. Men say the monks will bring pilgrims. Women say Aliena will buy our wool. Even in ash, hope is a seed. William feels it, and it maddens him. His rage is no longer just against Aliena or Philip. It is against the very idea that stone and song might outlast terror. And so, the web of power thickens. Kings, bishops, priors, earls, merchants, and outlaws pull at threads that tangle together in Kingsbridge. You stand in the half-built nave, light falling in slanted beams across raw stone, and you can feel it. Every vow, every cruelty, every dream tightening into a knot that must one day break. He comes home on a rain-silvered morning, walking out of mist the color of iron. Kingsbridge rises ahead, changed and the same. A meadow cut with cart ruts, cottages crouched under thatch. A priory whose church lifts toward a sky that already looks brighter where stone frames it. Jack stops where the road first gives him a clear view of the work and feels his breath catch. The nave walls stand heavy. The windows pinch the light. The vaults that Alfred has begun are thick, their curves blunt. The lines tense the way a bad joint is tense before it fails. He lays a palm on the pier by the west door, closes his eyes and hears weight grumble instead of sing. He does not shout his return. He finds Tom in the yard chalking out a template on a board. For a heartbeat, the older man just looks, as if time is doubled, placing boy and man on top of each other. Then Tom grips Jack's shoulders hard enough to bruise. "Well," he says, not trusting himself to say more. Jack sets his roll of parchments on the trestle and unknots the cord. They bend together over drawings made in cramped rooms by lamplight. Ribs that spring to a clean point and share the load like brothers who want the same thing. Webs so thin they seem like cloth turned to stone. Buttresses that stand outside and take the push so inside can be light. Jack draws a fingertip along the thrust line. "Here it runs," he says. And here we catch it. The arch points. It does not sag. Tom's eyes shine with the dangerous joy of a man who sees a better truth and cannot unsee it. "God save me," he whispers. "It solves the weight." When Alfred strides up and finds them bent over a stranger's lines, his mouth goes hard. He has grown broader, his beard coming in like scrub, his authority worn like a new cloak he checks in every reflection. "We are building," he says, "not dreaming." He taps Jack's drawings with a finger that leaves a smear of grit. No one trusts toys from Paris. Tom begins to answer, but Jack lifts a hand and meets Alfred's stare with calm that does not bend. "This isn't a toy," he says. "It is the right path for the weight." Alfred laughs without humor. "Then carry your weight back to the forest. The master here is me." Philip hears of the red-haired wanderer before he sees him. By the time Jack enters the chapter house, word has already walked ahead. A boy returned as a man with the continent in his head, a bag of proofs at his belt, a mind full of new curves. Philip studies him across the table where decisions are made with ink and prayer. "You left angry," the prior says. "You return changed." Jack bows. He speaks with care, describing ribs, ratios, and the way light behaves when stone is honest with it. He does not flatter. He does not plead. He unfolds last a small packet of waxed cloth and lays out neat letters and sworn statements that speak of a winter of shipwrecks. A hanged jongleur blamed for a nobleman's theft. A bishop's ring cut like a crooked cross. Walleran's name is not written there, but it breathes between the lines. Philip's eyes flick over the proofs. A shadow passes across his face and is gone. "The cathedral first," he says quietly. Truth comes to light in God's time. Help me make a house fit for that light. Jack nods. His gaze slides past the prior to the doorway where Aliena stands, half in sun. For a moment the yard noise fades. She is thinner, stronger, a woman hammered to a clean edge by years that would have broken others. Richard's colors hang from her belt. A ledger is tucked under her arm. When she steps forward, he sees the question in her eyes and a relief so fierce it stings. "You came back," she says, and the simple sentence feels like a prayer left unanswered too long. He wants to reach for her, but does not. She has a vow to keep, and he has a fight to win with stone. The weeks bruise and blaze at once. Jack takes the night watches in the yard so he can study by lamplight without men's grumbling. He builds mock-ups of joints and webs on the ground with scraps, then on a trestle with thin ribs of yew, coaxing the line until the load drops straight. He mixes a new mortar learned from a French master and adjusts the lime so the set is true. He teaches a dozen men how to set a centering with a hair more rise, how to lay voussoir so their faces kiss without complaint. Some learn hungrily. Some mutter that he is too young, that Alfred is master, that this is not how their fathers built. "But we are not our fathers," Jack answers and leaves the argument to the work. Alfred counters with orders and a thickening vault. He strips Jack from tasks that matter and assigns him to carve leaves no one will see. He doubles the webstones where one would suffice, then orders the centering struck early to prove his confidence. Tom watches the curve like a man listening to a storm getting its breath. "Shore it," he advises. "Leave the frames a week more." Alfred hears only the part that sounds like doubt. "It will stand," he says, and the scaffolds come down. The day of the feast draws people like a tide. The nave is not finished, but the vault over the crossing is roofed in slate, and the choir is framed with ribs, so Philip calls a mass to bless what rises and ask favor on what is still only chalk lines. Pilgrims kneel under raw stone and banners borrowed from a dozen parishes. Candles give back their small light to the gray curves overhead. Jack slips along the aisle, palms skimming piers, eyes on joints that should not move. He feels it the way a mason feels everything that matters, in his bones before his brain has words. A hairline opens where two webs meet. Dust sifts down as fine as flour. He is already running when the first pop comes, a noise like a finger snapping close to the ear. "Props," he shouts, voice cracking into the prayer's drone. "Ropes! Everyone out!" Some stare. Some obey the note inside command and move. Tom hears and does not question. He and two men heave a timber under the weak seam while Jack throws a rope around a pier and takes a turn with his body, trying to hold a building with his weight like a flea fighting a hound. Alfred, red with outrage, barges forward. "You'll shame me before the whole shire for nothing," he snarls and shoves the prop aside. The stone answers. A web panel slumps, slow as a sigh at first, then fast. Ribs twist. A joint shears with a noise no one forgets. The vault comes down in a gray-white roar. Candles die in a gust. The air fills with dust, shards, a rain of slate like knives. People surge toward the doors in a low animal wave. Philip does not run. He stands in the middle aisle and turns his body into a shepherd's crook, hooking stragglers into motion with nothing but his steadiness. Tom drags a stunned novice clear by the belt. Jack takes the second prop alone and rams it under a new crack, pushing so hard his shoulders scream. Then it is over, the wreckage settling into an ache of groans and crying. The crossing is a crater of rubble. The eastern piers hold. The choir ribs have lived. The price in bruises and broken bones is real, but the count of the lost is mercifully small. In the shocked quiet, a truth as heavy as any stone lands on every mind at once. The line was wrong. Alfred's weight had nowhere clean to go, so it went everywhere. No one needs speeches. The masons look from the fallen vault to Jack's pale, dust-smeared face and remember the rope pulled taut around his hands. Philip wipes grit from his eyes and meets Jack's gaze across the ruin. A single nod passes between them like a seal. Alfred opens his mouth, then closes it again as if the dust has turned to ash on his tongue. He turns away before anyone can read his eyes. Work begins the next dawn in the only way work can begin after failure, with sweeping and sorting and the refusing of despair. Jack lays out new curves beside the rubble, ribs crisp to a point that will share the burden instead of hoarding it. He walks the yard teaching with his hands, placing a mason's palm where the thrust runs, letting him feel the path. Here it travels, he says. Here we catch it. Tom watches him and feels something inside relax that has been tight since his first dream. Yes, he breathes, now we build the thing we meant. Walleran arrives with concern as smooth as oiled wood, his eyes taking in ruin, the faces, the quick allegiance shifting under men's ribs. He speaks piously of trials that purify and asks mildly whether a change of master might be wise. Philip's voice, when it comes, is quiet and unambiguous. We will change the line, he says, and the man who draws it. The bishop's smile thins by a hair. William, hearing later how a vault fell and a red-haired mason caught the town before the rubble did, grinds his teeth until his jaw aches. That night, Aliena stands with Jack at the edge of the yard, where the ground slopes to the river and reeds murmur to the dark. She takes his dust-blackened hands in both of hers and does not speak for a long time. When she does, her voice is low and level. My oath still binds me, she says, but I will not pretend I did not pray for you to come back. He bends his forehead to hers. Just one breath's worth of contact, as if they are checking each other exists. Then she lets go first because she must. Build it, she says. Build it so strong that men like William cannot make the world small again. He nods. He has new lines in his head and a future that finally feels like it can bear weight. Mist hangs low over the river when he steps back into Kingsbridge, leaner, harder. The same red flame of hair now cut by weather and work. He pauses at the edge of the building yard as if listening to a language he has not heard in years. Hammers speak in heavy syllables. Alfred's walls stand thick and sullen, windows narrow, arches round and burdened. Jack lays his palm to a pier and feels the load crawl down it like a tired animal. He closes his eyes and sees behind his lids the clean thrust lines he learned in Paris. Ribs that meet without strain, buttresses that drink force like roots take water. He opens them and walks on. Tom sees him first and the years fall from his face. No speeches, a hand to the shoulder, a breath held then released, a nod that says everything a father can say to the son he did not make and somehow forged anyway. Ellen comes from the lane with her wild hair and her hunter's gaze, and for one heartbeat you see the fierce woman become only a mother who has counted nights. She touches Jack's cheek once, as if to verify the bone is real, then gives a short laugh that breaks like flint. Well then, she says, what did the stones teach you? Alfred hears the murmur and turns. His jaw tightens. He has grown broader. His pride has grown with him. Men call him master now. The word sits on him like armor he never intends to take off. You're back, he says, as if the road should have kept Jack. We have no use for French tricks. Jack's eyes flick to the heavy imposts, the squat arches, the scaffold jointing that creaks in an east wind. He answers only, we'll see. Prior Philip arrives with the bell, robes damp with river air. The calm of a man who thinks forward even while others fight the present. He takes in the set of Alfred's shoulders, the way Tom's hand rests on Jack's arm, the quiet blaze in the young man's eyes. Welcome home, he says. Can what you've learned help us? Jack doesn't offer rhetoric. He unrolls a waxed cloth and lays drawings on a trestle. Pointed arches struck from simple circles, ribs that spring to a keystone boss, flyers keyed into outer piers. He talks of weight as a path, of letting line be honest, so stone need not be massive to be strong. Philip's fingers move over the ink as if reading prayer. Alfred snorts. Pretty pictures, he says. A church is not a spider's web. Word goes through town like rain through thatch. Jack is back. Aliena hears it at her stall and goes still, a small pause inside the machinery of her day. She has learned to keep her face steady while she bargains. She names a price, takes coin, lifts new fleece. Only when the last buyer turns away does she let herself look across the meadow toward the rising skeleton. In the narrow space between heartbeats, she is in the half-built nave again. Sunlight falling in blades, his hands chalked white, her breath caught. Then the present clamps down. She has duties. She has a vow. She has made a choice that cannot be unmade without breaking lives. Late in the day they meet where they cannot avoid it, under a raw arch that drinks shadow. Jack stops, the yard thudding around them as if far away. Aliena's face is the same and not. Grief and grit have carved it into something finer than beauty. He smiles once, small. "You're well," she answers in the voice she uses to steady skittish buyers. "I'm alive." She looks down at her hands. "I married." The word lands like a hammer on an anvil. The clang keeps ringing. She says the name without adornment. Alfred. Jack swallows. He makes himself nod. "For Richard." "For survival," she says, because truth must be said clean or it rots. A pause. "I am sorry." He shakes his head. "Don't be." Then he adds, because he cannot lie to her even for mercy, "I love you still." She flinches like someone touched a bruise and turns away before her face betrays her. Work closes around him because work is the one place grief cannot dictate. Jack asks for a day and a crew. Philip gives him the chapter house floor and 3 carts of scrap. With Tom and 2 nimble lads, he raises a timber frame the size of a small room and strings thin ribs of lath to show the curve of a vault. He weights the laths with stones at the web and at the springers, chalks lines where thrust would run, props the frame with a mock flyer and pier. Then he removes the flyer. The frame groans. He replaces it and the groan dies. He adds a pointed arch and the load drops into the pier with a sigh you can feel in your boots. The masons stand around, skeptical frowns smoothing into attention. Jack says little. He lets gravity do the persuading. Alfred watches with his arms crossed. He calls it a trick. Jack hands him the saw. "Cut where you like," he says. Alfred slices through a prop on the round arch side. The frame sags, laths strain, the web cracks. He hacks at the flyer on the pointed side. The pier takes the line and holds. A murmur runs around the circle. Philip closes his eyes and for a heartbeat you can almost see the nave as he has prayed it. Light like music, air like mercy. Remigius mutters about novelty. Philip opens his eyes. "We will not build a novelty," he says. "We will build well." The fight begins in parchment and ends in blood. Walleran, informed by loyal tongues that Philip means to change the plan, rides in with pious concern. He speaks of risk, of the duty to tradition, of the danger of a prior who thinks himself an architect. He suggests oversight. He means control. Philip stands in his plain robe with wet hem and refuses to trade light for obedience to another man's vanity. "We will build what is sound," he says, "and we will account for every coin." That night a wind rises from the east. Scaffold ties creak. Somewhere in the dark, knives touch rope. Near dawn, a ledger clerk hears a thud and calls out. Men stumble from pallets, Jack among them, bareheaded, eyes already finding the weak joint. A timber frame leans, then lurches, shouts. A ladder kicks free. Jack goes up the nearest support like a squirrel, rope he carried from the model still looped over his shoulder. He throws a bite around a horn, drops the tail to the ground and bellows for 3 men. The rope jerks the frame back a hand's breadth. Alfred pounds a wedge where Jack points. Tom heaves against a brace. The frame steadies. Someone finds the cut tie swinging like a grin. No one says the name, but all think it. Morning shows the damage to be small in timber and large in meaning. Philip calls the yard together. He will not say sabotage without proof. He says watchfulness. He says order. He says we continue. He gives Alfred the work he can do and gives Jack the curves that will carry the nave. Rage burns in Alfred's face like a banked fire. Jack bows and turns to the drawings. He knows what he is building now is not only a cathedral. It is an argument in stone against men who rule by fear. Aliena moves through the market that day like someone who has learned to walk with pain without limping. She buys fleece from farmers whose fields still show scorch marks, pays fair coin, encourages a widow to bring the rest next week. Richard rides in muddy to the knee from drilling with men who still call him boy when they forget to be polite. She lifts her head to answer and catches a flash of red on the scaffold. For a breath, her chest lifts. Then she lowers her gaze to the tally. A promise can be a pillar too, and pillars are heavy. At dusk, Jack goes to the glass house he has set up near the river. The furnace coughs and roars. In a clay pot, the melt glows like a small sun. He salts it, stirs with an iron rod, draws and turns until the gather blooms, then makes a crown and lets it slump to a disk on the sand. When it cools to a deep, impossible blue, he stands over it with hands shaking and thinks of morning light crossing the nave and laying that color on stone. He imagines Aliena walking there before the market opens, face lifted into a sky made by human minds and hands, and something that is not hope, not yet, still rises. He sleeps little. He writes by candle in a neat, monk-taught hand to men on the coast who remember a winter shipwreck and a bishop with a crooked cross ring. He ties the letters with twine, lays them beside a pouch where under a scrap of leather a tiny carved ship rests against wood. Proof waits its hour, so do reckonings. In the morning the yard is a hive. New lines go up on the transept wall, sharper, truer. A boy runs a hand along the chalk and smiles because even he can tell the difference without knowing why. Tom moves through it all with quiet pride in his eyes and a sadness tucked in the corners that only Ellen and Jack see. Philip watches from the crossing and just once lets himself imagine the vault closed, the blue poured in. The murmur of pilgrims under ribs like branches meeting in a forest of stone. Then he turns because there are carts to hire and coins to count and enemies who pray in Latin while they sharpen knives. William watches from the ridge with his mother at his side. The new lines offend him the way a clear note offends a man who loves thunder. Regan's voice is silk wrapped over a whipcord. "He has returned," she says. "The one who makes the crowd look up." At last William understands what must be struck if he is to be feared again. Not barns, not carts, dream. He rides away already tasting smoke. Jack sets his square, sights along a taut string and gives a quiet order. Men move. Stone rises. Grief sits in his ribs like a tenant who will not leave. But the work makes room around it. He will not ask Aliena to break what she swore. He will build something worthy of the vow she chose. He will build so clean that even envy must admit the truth. And when the time comes, he will lay his other work, names, dates, rings, a rope's history, before a table where even bishops must answer. The meadow has become a forest of timber frames and rising stone. You step among the scaffolds where the air hums with iron on rock, each strike of the mallet echoing like a heartbeat. The cathedral is no longer a dream drawn in dust. It climbs visibly now, ribs arching upward, walls pierced with windows that promise light to come. The townsfolk gather each morning to watch. Children gape, Merchants whisper of pilgrims who will bring coins, and even the poorest peasants feel their backs straighten when they see towers inch toward the sky. Tom moves through it all with the steadiness of a man who has found his purpose. His beard is gray now, his hands knotted with scars, but his eyes glow when he touches stone. He runs his palm across a newly set arch, nods once, and the masons feel their own pride ignite. "It holds," he says, and in those two words they hear not just craftsmanship but hope itself. Every block they lift, every rib they fit feels like a step toward a future that will outlast their bones. Jack has become the soul of the work. He sketches new curves on parchment, points to lines that will bend upward instead of outward, and shows how a buttress properly placed will drink the weight like a tree root drinks rain. At first, the masons grumble. His hands are too pale, his words too sharp for a boy who grew in a forest ruin. But then they see the vaults he designs take shape. They watch ribs of stone meet high above their heads without collapse, the webbing delicate and strong, the walls rising thinner yet more enduring than Alfred's heavy blocks. And when the first small window is glazed with the deep blue jack brought from France, the light that spills across the floor silences every doubt. Aliena, meanwhile, keeps the lifeblood of the dream flowing. Her wool trade thrives despite William's raids. She has built trust among farmers and merchants, paying fair coin when others would cheat. Bolts of cloth move through her hands in steady rhythm, and with each sale she sees another piece of her vow secured for Richard's future earldom. Yet the work is more than duty. When she walks through the half-built nave and sees the light dance across Jack's carvings, faces of saints, of angels, of women whose eyes resemble her own, her heart stirs against the iron chain of her oath, but the vow remains. Richard is nearly a man now, sword in hand, pride swelling as quickly as Alfred's. He trains with other young knights, dreaming of banners and battles. Aliena watches him with hope, but also with fear. War has a way of consuming boys like him, of chewing them into men who look too much like William. She prays that Richard's honor will hold, that her sacrifice, her marriage, her silence, her endurance will not be wasted. William Hamleigh has not been idle. His castle rises on the ridge, thick walls meant to crush, towers meant to menace. He rides through the countryside, his cruelty sharpening with every year, every humiliation. He strikes where Kingsbridge is weakest, burning a half-built scaffold, ambushing a wool train, spreading fear until villagers whisper prayers not for deliverance but for mercy. Each raid is a wound in the cathedral's flesh. Each act of violence is meant to prove that William's power is greater than Philip's faith or Tom's stone. Philip feels the pressure keenly. He bargains for timber, for oxen, for rights to quarry stone, each promise balanced on the knife edge of shifting politics. At court, he kneels before Stephen, speaks calmly, offers the vision of a cathedral as a fortress of faith in a broken land. Yet behind him, Walleran Bygod whispers doubts in the king's ear, his pale eyes gleaming. Walleran is a master of delay, and every delay is a blow. He does not need to strike with a sword when parchment and suspicion will do. Then one winter famine gnaws again. Grain fails, flocks thin, children's cries carry through the night. The work slows. Men drift away in search of food. The cathedral's skeleton stands half-finished, arches like broken ribs against a gray sky. Despair creeps in. "It will never be finished," a mason mutters. "The Lord will burn it again." Philip hears, Tom hears, and even Jack feels the weight pressing down. Yet in the midst of hunger and ruin, the dream refuses to die. Tom stands in the nave one evening, stars spilling through the open roof. He runs his hand along a column, feels the roughness, and whispers to the air as if to Agnes herself. "It will stand. It must." His breath smokes in the cold, and in that breath you hear both prayer and defiance. But fate is not gentle. One morning, while the yard is still heavy with frost, Tom collapses beside the stones he loved more than food, his breath rattling away into silence. His hands, so long the instruments of the dream, fall still. The masons gather, faces gray with grief and fear. Without him, they wonder, can the cathedral rise? Jack kneels by the body, fingers trembling on the old man's calloused palm. He is not Tom's son by blood, yet he feels the loss as if it were his own father gone to earth. Ellen lays her wild hair across Tom's chest, eyes closed, lips whispering a language older than Latin, older than church. Alfred stands at a distance, arms folded, eyes hard as stone, and in that distance lies a choice he does not yet see, for now Kingsbridge mourns. Bells toll slow and heavy, echoing across a valley scarred by fire and war. The walls of the cathedral stand unfinished, silent as tombstones. Yet even in grief, the dream does not vanish. It lingers in the curves Jack sketched, in the ledgers Aliena keeps, in Philip's steady prayers, in the vow that ties a sister to her brother's future. The cathedral is no longer just Tom's vision. It belongs now to them all. Grief hangs over the yard like fog, but work does not stop for mourning. The day after the bells toll for Tom, Alfred arrives early, jaw set, voice louder than it needs to be. He claims the mantle of master as if it were forged for him alone. Philip, drained by loss and by enemies who preferred delays to daggers, signs the ledger and nods. He cannot leave a vacuum for Walleran to fill. The stone must rise even if under hands that do not love it. Winter presses cold into mortar. Alfred wants triumph to follow tragedy. He orders the nave vault closed before the thaw, the lime not yet cured, the timber centering too rough to read the line. Jack says little. He measures, he watches, he sees hairline fissures creep like frost along the web. It will not hold, he tells Philip in a low voice. We need time. Philip's eyes close for a breath, then open. We have hunger. We have William. We have Walleran, he answers. I will buy you what time I can. He cannot buy enough. The first failure does not roar. It sighs. On a Sunday when the town gathers in a roofed transept for Mass, women wrapped against the cold, children wide-eyed, merchants smelling of sheep fat and smoke, a web panel buckles with a soft, dreadful release. Dust drifts like ash. A mason shouts and shoves two novices clear. A rib pops free, then another. Timber groans. For one long second, the whole weight pauses between falling and holding, a coin flipping in a gray sky. Then a section drops. Screams. Stone thunders to the floor, shattering pews. When the dust clears, there are 3 bodies on the flags and more groaning in the aisle. Silence after. Philip kneels beside the dead and prays, not for show, for anchor. Alfred stands rigid, face a stone mask that cannot admit error. Jack is already among the splinters with a square and a plumb bob, tracing the truth as if it were a wound he must diagnose to save a life. Pull the rest down, he says, calm, cutting through panic. We rebuild with pointed ribs, proper flyers, cured mortar, and lighter webs. Or we bury more than these 3. Philip lifts his head. He sees tears on a woman's face, blood on a boy's sleeve, grief written across a town that trusted him. He stands. We pull it down, he says. Alfred opens his mouth, then closes it. In that small surrender, something in him hardens into hatred that will not soften again. That night, injustice spreads like cold through a thin blanket. In a narrow room that smells of damp rushes, Aliena faces the other weight of her vow. Alfred is not gentle. He is not kind. He is not even capable. He turns failure into blame and shame, into a cruelty that stings worse for being small. When morning comes, Aliena rises, gathers her cloak, and walks out under a sky the color of iron. In the infirmary, she seeks Philip and says what must be said. There is no marriage here, she tells him. Not in flesh, not in spirit. She does not weep. I will not live in that house. Philip looks at her and sees not scandal, but a woman carrying a vow that has eaten too much of her life. He nods once. You owe God no pretense, he says. You owe no man your torment. Days later, the town learns what Jack knew when he first looked at her face in the market. She carries a child, and it is not Alfred's. Whispers fly like sparrows flushed from a hedge. Some are kind, many are not. Aliena answers none of them. She sells wool. She counts coin. She feeds Richard's men. At dusk, she leans a hand on a half-built pier and lets her breath slow until her heart stops racing. She will not apologize for love. She will not abandon her oath. Both are true. Both are heavy. Jack meets her not with claims, but with work. He spends his days dismantling failure and his nights in the glass house, pulling blue from the furnace and sketching a lantern to flood the crossing with morning. When she passes the shed, he is there, sleeves rolled, hair damp with sweat, turning a sheet so it cools without shattering. He looks up. They do not touch. They do not need to. The child she carries is already the proof of what they are. Walleran arrives in the aftermath like a physician who prefers patients to remain ill. He tours the fallen bay with lips pressed thin in pious sorrow. He speaks of rashness, of novelty that mocks tradition, of a prior who has allowed a bastard boy to endanger lives. He asks for oversight again. He means rule. Philip hears him out. Then Jack lays a roll of parchments on the chapter table with hands that do not shake. He does not speak of geometry first. He speaks of a winter when a ship broke England's line of succession. He speaks of survivors chased as if guilt runs on tides. He speaks of a jongleur hanged on a bishop's word for a theft that made another man rich. He places letters in Philip's hand, affidavits in careful Latin from a sacrist near Caen, from a shipwright in Barfleur, from a clerk who once warmed the ringed hands of a prelate by the fire and remembered the crooked cross on the ring. He sets down a carved sliver of driftwood stamped with a listing ship, a charm for a child left with monks on a cold night. He says the name of the bishop in those letters. He does not need to say it twice. The room goes still. Remigius swallows. Brothers look down as if their sandals have become fascinating. Walleran's face hardly moves, but his eyes do. Slander, he says almost gently. A bastard's fables. Philip does not answer at once. He reads the old seals. He tests the dates. He weighs the men behind the ink by the way their words sit on the page. When he looks up, his voice is plain. You framed an innocent to save your story of the sea, he says, and you would frame us all now to keep a hold you never earned. Walleran straightens, pale as bone. You cannot accuse a bishop, he says. You can excommunicate a prior, Philip answers. But truth does not lay down for a ring. Proof will not hang a bishop alone, but it will loosen the hands that held him up. At court, the tide is turning. Stephen wants order more than he wants Walleran's plots. Maud's fortunes swing and swing back. The great men smell weakness and edge away. Walleran finds fewer doors open, fewer ears bent, more eyes that remember a crooked cross. He does not fall yet, but he has stepped onto a slope. William does not wait for slopes. He rides. His lesson this time is meant to end all lessons. He chooses a day of worship because fear grows best where prayer should. Kingsbridge wakes to smoke. Torches lick scaffolds. Men with iron studs in their gloves beat townsfolk back toward the transept, herding them like sheep. Into the church, someone cries, thinking stone safer than street. William laughs, delighted that they do his work for him. He orders the doors barred. "Burn them," he says, "and let their God eat ash." But the fall taught Jack and Philip more than sorrow. The nave they have not roofed is a fire break. The transept doors hold only a moment before men inside lift the bar and pour out smoke black and wild-eyed into the bitter air. Jack's crew splits, half for bucket lines, half for axes to knock burning scaffolds clear before they spread. Aliena drags 2 children from under a toppled stall and shoves them toward the river. Richard's men form a wedge and punch a gap in the ring of riders, pulling townsfolk through. Flames roar, but this time the town has practiced the shape of courage. In the press, William loses the neatness of cruelty and becomes only a man with a sword among people who will not cower the way they used to. He slashes, he bellows, he looks for Aliena's face and finds instead the point of Richard's blade. The boy is not a boy now. Steel meets steel. William is stronger, but Richard is quicker and mad with the clarity of defending home. He draws blood. William reels, shocked by the red on his own sleeve. Regan is not here to steady him. He flees toward the ridge with 3 men at his heels and a dozen behind him. A townsman hurls a hook. It catches on William's stirrup leather. He thunders free, but the hook jerks him sideways. He crashes into a ditch, scrambles, runs. Richard does not catch him. The sheriff will, because burning a church is not only a sin, it is the king's business. News rides faster than horses when it smells like treason. Witnesses swear oaths, the barred doors, the torches, the order shouted with delight. A royal justice comes in a plain cloak with a seal that outweighs banners. He listens. He counts scars. He visits the charred gate. He hears Walleran advise leniency in Latin that tastes like bile. He orders a gallows built. The crowd that gathers is the same kind of crowd that once watched another man swing at the opening of this story. The air is different now. It holds anger, yes, but also the hard quiet of people who have learned the weight of their own choices. William mounts the scaffold, cursing. The rope waits. Regan does not come. No bishop lays a hand on his shoulder. When the trap drops, the crack is only wood. The lesson his mother taught, the one about witnesses, turns on him. They have seen. They will remember. Fear will not do his work for him anymore. Walleran's judgment is quieter, but it bites deeper. He is not hanged. He is unseated. His allies vanish. His petitions return unopened. Philip lays the proof on a table at court and does not raise his voice. Men who have wanted an excuse to forget the bishop's favors now discover a love for truth. Walleran goes back to a smaller house. No one kisses his ring. He begins to look over his shoulder for men who once nodded when he spoke. Nothing burns him, but everything he built with lies starts to come down. After the smoke clears, Jack and his crew take down the whole failed bay and lay new springers with chalked lines that make even skeptics breathe easier. The town buries 3, carves their names into a lintel, and goes back to work with a grief that has become fuel. Aliena stands in the doorway of her stall with ash still in her hair and lets Jack place his hand rough and warm for a heartbeat on the swell of her child. They look at each other the way people do who have walked through fire and found each other on the far side. The valley is scarred. The work is slow. Enemies still watch. But a reckoning has passed through Kingsbridge like a storm, and some things have been set right. The ruthless are less sure of themselves. The liars are less believed. The stone remembers everything and keeps nothing secret. In the morning the bells sound and the yard fills and the lines go up again, clean as truth. Judgment has fallen. Justice, imperfect but real, has laid a foundation. Now the rest must rise. Dawn breaks over Kingsbridge in a hush of pale gold. Mist drifts low on the river meadow, but through it the new cathedral rises, no longer a skeleton of scaffolds and chalk lines, but a body of stone and glass. Ribs arched high, windows filled with the deep blue Jack once cradled in his hands. You walk into the nave, and for the first time the vault closes overhead, light pouring down like water through jeweled glass, bathing stone in colors that shift as clouds drift past the sun. The townsfolk gather, faces upturned, and the air itself seems to breathe with them. Years of hunger and war, of betrayal and blood are sealed into these walls. Tom's hands lie buried in the earth beneath the floor, yet his dream has been carried forward by others. By Jack's restless brilliance, by Philip's unshaken faith, by Aliena's unbreakable vow, by Richard's sword raised at last in victory. The work is no longer one man's obsession. It is a community's defiance carved into stone. Aliena walks slowly down the nave, her child in her arms, the boy's hair a pale flame against her shoulder. The years of struggle weigh on her frame, yet she holds her head high. Around her, the people of Kingsbridge press close, whispering not of scandal but of gratitude. Her wool trade has fed them through famine, and her stubborn resolve has given them a future. She looks up at the vaults that Jack designed, at the blue glass blazing like heaven's own skin, and feels her father's vow finally met. Richard now wears the mantle of Earl of Shiring, the name restored. Her oath is fulfilled, though the cost has carved deep lines into her soul. Jack stands apart, watching light strike stone. He has returned from Europe with the secrets of flying buttresses, of ribs and webs, of glass that sings in color, and now the proof is here for all to see. The nave holds because line and weight tell the truth. The tower rises because roots outside bear the load. He runs his hand over a carved boss where angels lift their wings in stone, and he thinks of the nights he spent with compasses and parchments, of the journey that led him through fire and hunger and loss. This place is no longer just Tom's dream. It is his and Aliena's and the town's and God's. The people sense it. Pilgrims pour in, their staffs tapping on stone, their eyes widening as they step into the sea of light. They drop coins into chests, not for fear of hellfire, but in awe, in gratitude, in wonder. Markets swell. Merchants bring cloth and spices, children chase each other among the stalls, and Kingsbridge becomes what Philip dreamed. A beacon, a sanctuary, a place where faith and labor, suffering and sacrifice have been transfigured into beauty. Yet the story does not end in light alone. The shadows have left scars. William Hamleigh's name still lingers like a curse in the villages he burned, though his rope-bitten death has silenced his laughter. Walleran lives, but his power has withered, his ring a hollow ornament on a hand no one bows to kiss. The ruthless, once feared, are remembered only for cruelty. Their towers will crumble faster than the stone ribs that now soar above your head. Philip, older now, walks the cloister with slower steps, but his eyes are still steady. He looks at the completed nave, at the tower rising, and knows he will not see the final spire pierce the heavens. Yet he is content. Order has been planted in the soil of chaos, and it has taken root. His prayers have been built into walls that will stand long after he is dust. Ellen, her hair streaked with silver, lingers in the shadows of the new church. She does not kneel. She does not cross herself. She watches the colored light fall across Jack and Aliena's child, across Richard's sword raised in a ceremonial salute, across the faces of peasants who once feared hunger more than sin. For Ellen, the cathedral is not only God's house, it is proof that the lie which killed the man she loved has been broken. She allows herself a small, fierce smile as if some ancient curse has lifted. And you, standing at the heart of Kingsbridge, hear the murmur of voices rise into a hymn. The sound swells, carried upward by vaults that seem to bend the air itself, by glass that floods the stone with colors no hand could mix. For a moment you are lifted too, drawn upward into a space that feels larger than the sky. You understand then what Tom Builder saw in the dirt all those years ago, what carried him through hunger and grief. The hope that men and women, even in an age of fire and betrayal, can shape something that will outlast them. The cathedral is finished at last. Its towers stand as pillars of eternity, rooted in earth pointing toward heaven. Beneath them lie the bones of those who dreamed it into being: Tom, whose hands first drew the lines; Ellen, who gave him courage; Jack, whose mind gave stone the gift of flight; Aliena, whose vow became the town's lifeline; Richard, whose sword reclaimed their name. Their struggles are carved into every arch, every rib, every colored window that catches the dawn, as the bells ring across the valley, as pilgrims kneel in wonder. You feel the story close around you like a cloak. The pillars of the earth are not only stone and mortar. They are vows kept through hunger, loves endured through fire, truths spoken against power, and dreams carried through generations. The ruthless may burn villages and twist laws, but the dream of light endures. And now it stands here before you, immense and eternal, whispering across the centuries that even in the darkest age, human hands can build toward heaven, and 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 build